Hello, and welcome to another fully live Wednesday Q&A episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we have a long-lost former co-host come back to tell us all about what they've been up to. Michael, I have to say, I admire your persistence in hunting the Squatch, and it's
Yes, and indeed, I had to go on a sabbatical and find the Squatch.
it's something every man must do someday. So I'm proud of you for making it back. And a lot of our viewers were wondering, where have you been? What have you been up to? So today we're going to have just a general Q&A open for asking questions. And also, I believe you're going to talk a little bit about your new job, what you've been up to, and what kind of certifications that you're going for. Now, the other thing is we have a lot of people who have in the past asked us about, like, what are my favorite certifications? What's the best way to study for a certification? And I am the worst person to ask, because I, as I tell people, failed one like CCNA like networking class. Like, I do not have the study skills to tell you guys how to succeed at that. My job doesn't require certifications, although a lot of jobs it certainly helps. So Michael has been studying for some certifications and actually gone after several of them, including semi-unrelatedly, a drone certification, which I wasn't,
Yes,
I just realized some people might be interested in that too, because we've been talking a lot about like drone hacking and stuff on the last couple episodes. So yeah, Michael, you want to give us the short, or I guess the version of what you've been up to?
Yeah, so I recently started working at First Call Computer Solutions based in Western Montana. It's a managed service provider. And my job title there is Virtual Chief Information Security Officer, although I just prefer to chop off the virtual and just call myself a Chief Information Security Officer because it sounds a little more impressive. But basically, we have a advanced cybersecurity offering that we give to clients, and my role in that is communicating with the board and C-suite, and effectively establishing a cybersecurity strategy. And then we have other people that actually implement that strategy, but making decisions about, okay, do we need MFA? If we do, like, how are we going to implement this, and making some of those high level decisions is where I'm there to help communicate to owners and like help them understand the risk posture and how they can mitigate some of those risks. And then as far as certifications, yes, I did in fact get my part 107 FAA drone license, so now I can fly drones for commercial purposes. And then I also got one Microsoft certification around like the fundamentals of security. But I can talk about that later if people have questions about like Microsoft certifications or certifications in general.
Definitely. And let's see. Also, anybody in the chat who has questions about this, feel free to chime in. I wanted to also shout out, just because we had some questions and discussion on it, that we also have our Discord server. So if you're getting on the stream late and you want to make sure that you can continue the conversation later, then you can always go to our Discord server at nugget.lol. That's nugget.lol. And as you can see, I'll share the screen. There's a number of people on there asking questions, sharing news, and kind of giving each other advice. So we had a couple discussions last time that kind of spilled off of the stream onto Discord. And it's great because we have a lot of interesting people there who are able to say hello and maybe offer their opinion. So yes, by the way, we are doing the stream today, but as you can see, it's quite active. So we're probably going to cover most of these things that have been dropped in the live chat on the next news stream. But I just wanted to shout it out because we've had a lot of really great people contributing and generally asking wonderful questions in the Discord server. So yeah, so all right, sorry, just wanted to shout that out because I saw some activity in the Discord and I wanted everyone to know that it's out there. But Michael, you said that you got the FAA license. What exactly does that allow you to do versus like a normal person who wants to get started flying drones but like doesn't have one of these licenses?
One thing, so there is a commenter saying no sound. I can hear Kody, so maybe check your system, but I don't know. I just wanted to alert you, Kody, that that's happening.
Yes,
Yeah,
if anybody can't hear us besides Microsoft, then please let us
I think
know.
it's mask on or off.
Sure.
Okay. Anyway, so yeah, so the Part 107 basically allows you to like fly larger drones and do them for commercial purposes. basically anything you would receive compensation for. Um, but yeah, like, so there's the rule around like 250-gram drones, right? Like, if you're familiar with that, that's why you have like the light DJI drones and stuff. So that way you can fly those without needing any extra things, right? But a lot a lot of people are doing things now with drones, even where they might not be thinking it's commercial purposes, but it probably actually is. An example of this would be, you're making YouTube videos and you put them up on YouTube. Even, 5 years from now, if you decide that you want to become a YouTube partner, enable monetization, then you would be breaking federal law by doing that because you shot that drone video without having that license, right?
Hmm.
And then also, it just is generally good knowledge about a lot of the things you need to be doing to legally comply with flying your drone. Like, don't fly over people. When is it appropriate to fly over a crowd? Can you fly over a moving vehicle? A lot of these things that, frankly, it's been the Wild West for the last decade. I've been around since, like, the first quadcopters were becoming a thing, right? And I've seen it go from zero regulation to like they're trying to juggle like what's the appropriate level of regulation right now. So there's a lot of good information there if you want to be a drone pilot and stay inside the bounds of the law. If that makes sense.
Okay. Also, mask on or off. I got you right this time. Says it was my device. Sorry. Okay. Thank you everyone to let us know that there was not a sound issue. Okay. Cool. So here's a question, Michael. Is it legal to use the Amazon drone gift dropper that is currently available on Amazon for like $16, $20?
It is. I am a little rusty on this. It's been a while, but as far as I remember, it is actually legal to drop things. But it the requirement is you basically have to do it in a safe manner. So it's like you couldn't drop stuff over a crowd. And for example, the common thing talked about these days is like delivery drones. And currently, the regulations are not there to support that yet. You can get special waivers for beyond visual line of sight with drones, but it's really tricky. And it's just not as ubiquitous as it would need to be to have those drones because those drones are operating farther than you can see. And to be operating legally, the visual observer needs to have eyes on the drone. And obviously that's not going to happen. And it can't be like through a tool kind of thing. It can't be like, oh, I have a camera on a cell tower there and I'm going to watch it through that. No, you need to have someone physically there because to be legally compliant, you have multiple people on your team. You have the licensed drone operator and then a visual observer, but you can also have like an operator of the controls of the drone. And those people don't need to be licensed at all. It only needs to be the one operator. And I don't even have to be manning the controls. So
Interesting. Yeah, that is. Okay, so it would be legal to drop something from the drone, but it wouldn't be legal to fly it further away than I can physically see or my visual observer can see
Right.
and then drop it. Okay, that's
And
interesting.
yeah, and it wouldn't be legal to drop it in certain areas, like over a crowd, for instance,
Weird.
or or
That-
um, or cause any damage. I forget the exact numbers, but there's even regulations about like how much damage your drone can cause to physical objects before you have to report it to the FAA. So you get to learn all of those fun things and then take a multiple choice test, which is three answers per multiple choice. Is like, I'm not going to say a joke, but it is very easy. You actually study.
And then we also have James in the chat saying, "Hello, Michael. Long time no see. Glad you're here."
Yes. Good to see you, James.
So, all right. So the other thing of what you've been working on is certifications. Actually, let me take this. Let me take this question real quick.
Mhm.
What do we think about the Pegasus spyware zero-click exploit? So in a nutshell, like the current environment for security researchers is, oh, I found like a really important bug in like an iPhone or like WebKit or something that's like a big deal when it comes to mobile devices, and I'm going to try to get paid for my work because it was hard to find this thing. I have two basic choices. I can either go to the vendor and be like, hi, I found this problem, and they'll pay me out like often like not that much money, or I can go to a sketchy third-party cyber mercenary and get paid a couple $1 million for them to weaponize this bug and turn it into something like a zero-click exploit, which then gets sold to the richest people on the planet so they can stalk journalists and basically anybody else that challenges their power and do oppressive government stuff. Obviously, that second chain is more lucrative for security researchers, but it also has societal impacts. And one of them is the development of like cyber warfare technology like this, where somebody who's not doing anything wrong can receive like a text message or something, and through no clicks, no interaction, actually be infected by this bug. So the more severe these bugs are, the more they tend to go for. And recently, like Apple and Google have gotten a lot better about increasing the bug bounties around these specific things that cyber mercenary groups have really gotten excellent at weaponizing. But that's really the pipeline for like how these sorts of things come to be. Like if these things don't get turned in to the vendor because it's not profitable to do so, then people can make a lot of money by basically like selling out people they've never met and like going to these cyber mercenary groups with very sketchy, very, very sketchy reputations and getting a bunch of money for something that the vendor has no idea is a problem yet, but probably will find out soon.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of problems too, I feel like, of nation states in particular, but also, like you said, cyber mercenaries hoarding these 0 days. And then you see conflicts happen, war in Ukraine, sort of things. And then, like, not a bajillion, but, tens or hundreds of these 0 days come out all at once. And it can be quite overwhelming to handle, especially now that I have more experience, like working with some of these small and medium sized businesses. Like, it can take time to like get everything up to speed and updated. And, sometimes those update cycles aren't as fast as you would want them to be to protect from some of these 0 days.
Yeah. It's one of those things where like these small and medium-sized businesses kind of get caught in the middle of a lot of this stuff. If it's like if we're talking about something like Eternal Blue or something like that, where it's this big thing that affects so many people, lots of people use the technology, and like everybody needs to update. That's where really these like small, medium-sized businesses get left behind. And these sorts of exploits that then are targeting maybe like a system instead of an individual become really, really important. For the kinds of things where they're like going after like iPhones or like personal devices, like it's constantly a cat and mouse game, because these really big companies like Google, Microsoft, and Apple are all involved trying to like fix them and detect them. So it's really an interesting game that involves a lot of players. It involves like these small, medium-sized businesses, it involves individuals, and it also involves both like government agencies and like the manufacturers of the software that runs on these phones. So it really is like a lot of different players that all have to be working together in order to make these sorts of attacks less effective. But you see them in the news a lot, and they tend to be something that the average user has really no defense against. But the good news is zero-click exploits are extremely expensive. So unless you've attracted the attention of someone in like relatively rich and powerful or an unfriendly government, you're unlikely to go up against them yourself. But there really is nothing you can do. The only thing that I think the NSA recommends is to constantly like reboot your phone, because a lot of these attacks actually will not survive a reboot. The really expensive ones will, but like the two things you find is like the more expensive attacks will survive a reboot and or zero click. So like you'll find some ones kind of in the middle that are like less expensive that are maybe a zero click, but they can't survive a reboot. And those are the ones that maybe by rebooting your phone occasionally and clearing out the memory, some of this malware that lives in memory could be theoretically dealt with.
There are other solutions along the lines of like compartmentalization, like Cubes OS and stuff like that, where basically each application is running in its own like tiny VM. Not very efficient, but if you were really concerned about that, or you could also like completely isolate a device from the outside internet. Or there are various ways you could protect against that, but that's where you get into that really steep cost curve, right? Of like, how critical is it to actually? Is it like this would be nice to protect against versus like absolutely mission critical that this system cannot go down, right? And then I wanted to answer two questions. 8-Bit Oni was saying we're streaming to Twitter now. We've been streaming to Twitter like since we started this. Since we started Security Forward.
Who knows at this point? Honestly, I noticed that it was like like sometimes it links out to the YouTube and sometimes it links out to Twitter specifically. Like so
Okay.
much stuff is changing with Twitter constantly that
Mhm.
honestly, if something did happen and we were now streaming like directly to Twitter, like we were set up to stream to like Periscope and then that went down and then it was just Twitter. So I have no idea what's
Mhm.
going on the Twitter front. If you can even see us on Twitter, then do you only still get like 600 tweets a day or something stupid? Like, well,
Oh,
that's
oh yeah. I have some theories about why that was the case, but I'm going to go on to the other question by JR.
yes.
Essentially, what he's asking about is what's called remote ID, but also like DGI has its own implementation of that as well. So remote ID is what's going into effect now in the US, and I think it's already in effect in Europe. But basically, it's a telemetry signal that your drone sends out. There are two versions of it, but basically it'll send out where the drone is itself. And then if you bought the drone from a commercial manufacturer, the drone will also yell out the location of its operator. Um, if you are retrofitting remote ID, which is possible, so like I built a personal quadcopter and I want to fly it around, or I have RC plane, for instance, that I built that I want to fly around, then you can get a retrofit remote ID module, and that goes in the unmanned aerial vehicle itself, and then it only gives the location of the airborne vehicle, not the controller. But basically, it's actually really kind of stupidly simple. It's using Wi-Fi beacons or Bluetooth beacons
What?
as the remote ID solution, and that's so. If you're familiar with like ADSB and like how commercial air traffic does that, no, it's not even doing anything that complicated. It's simply making like a Wi-Fi beacon that's saying all the information in it. You can dig into more details online. But yeah, that's where
Hmm.
DGI had its own proposed solution, which wasn't, I don't think, Wi-Fi based, and that would give more nuanced information about the remote pilot and stuff. And that's actually come into the spotlight in certain conflicts around the world because those were very easy to intercept and publicized as encrypted, but were not in fact encrypted.
Yeah. So here's a question, rather a statement. I don't see any reason why you couldn't just disable tracking on a drone, particularly if you just built it yourself. Yes, like for a drone that you built
Mhm.
yourself, like that's certainly, you have complete
Yeah.
control over what circuitry you put in there and what it does. And there's lots of different options for piloting the drone or whatever, like using open source software. Where it gets tricky is with like commercial drones, like
Mhm.
DJI, for example, that is going to be broadcasting telemetry in different ways. It's going to be broadcasting telemetry back to DJI servers to make sure you're allowed to fly where you're flying. It's going to be storing telemetry on your device as well as the SD card. And yes, it's also going to be broadcasting. Now in like DJI, just in my menu settings, I see when I'm flying, there is like a little like ADSB style like drone tracking thing
Mhm.
that is presumably going to become mandatory at some point, but right now it's just an option to tick on and off. So if you want to disable at least the broadcast of telling others nearby that
Mhm.
your drone is flying, it's currently an option you could tick on and off, with the
One
DJI app.
nuance to what you're saying is I think what you're referring to is actually sense and avoid. So the drone can have an ADSB receiver inside of it, which allows it to sense commercial air traffic around it and then autonomously avoid that air traffic. Because there are regulations about like altitude and various separation that you can have from commercial air traffic. So that's sense and avoid that you're referring to.
I think I'm actually talking about remote ID.
Okay, yeah, no, remote ID is the actual telemetry of the drone. Yeah.
Right. So remote ID is something that can be turned on and off and generally like
Mhm.
allows you to let others around you know that you're flying. And the idea, of course, is to make it so that like people who are flying in the area or
Mhm.
have like, some sort of receiver would be able to sense that there's a drone and get some sort of automated update about it. In fact, here's the little page on it. Let me turn
Oh yeah.
on the screen. But yeah,
Um,
it's just an interesting facet to
mhm.
this whole conversation about like how do you track drones, how do you see them? Well, like everybody's kind of bringing like a lot of these manufacturers are bringing their own solution to the table. Yeah, and like this is one of them, but that is currently something that you can turn on and off. I have it firmly turned off but I am not 100% like clear on the technology this uses. I just know it's compared to an electronic license plate for drones, and there's currently a couple apps available that will allow you to sense this and tell what drones are in the air and even pull information about the operator.
This is what I was saying was the Wi-Fi and or Bluetooth beacon. Basically, there's two ways you can implement it, but they both use that. There are custom firmwares you can install if you were in a conflict or something like that to these DJI drones that are not factory supported firmwares, but can disable this. And yeah, remote ID hasn't quite gone into effect yet. If I remember, the date's coming up very soon. But basically, all the drones being manufactured now have the support enabled for that. Because if you are familiar with Pilot, it's like Arduino Autopilot. They're actually able to use ESP32s to comply with remote ID, and they have like a GitHub repository that you can look up for that and just easily implement it.
Here's a question. Would it be possible for emitting a signal blocker, of course that would be very legal, that disables the flight of drones nearby? Curious to know. Yes. So obviously any sort of like GPS jamming is going to get you in a lot of trouble, but a lot of DJI drones will not take off if they can't get an initial GPS coordinate. And I don't know if they use like a GPS to try to get like, like an approximate GPS, like if they can't get the firm version, or if they use the device that they're connected to get the GPS if they can't get it themselves. But a lot of DJI drones will absolutely not take off. And I know this because I tried to like record some art in storm drain tunnels, and I found that I could not power on and fly the drone even in like low altitude mode where it won't go over 5 meters. It just will not start at all if there's no GPS signal available to the device that's flying it and the drone. I have been able to get the drone to fly when the device I'm flying it with gets a GPS signal. So I think that there's some sort of like transmission there that like allows it to do a limited mode. But if you were completely blocking GPS signals, I do not think that you would be able to fly a drone in the area, and for pretty good reason, because if somebody wanted to fly a drone somewhere, illegal, they could theoretically just block the GPS on the drone and their phone and then, have at it, because that system wouldn't be working. Again, would attract a lot of attention and would get you in a lot of trouble though.
Well, there was a pretty famous case about a decade ago where Iran was able to spoof GPS signals and convince a US spy drone to land. So these sorts of things happen, and jamming is like the brute force hammer method of doing that. But you'll see a lot of anti-drone solutions these days where they have their big weird rifle with like huge blocks on the end. That's all they're doing is jamming. Usually it's 2.4 and 5.8 gigahertz are the main control frequencies. 915, 914 megahertz is like a longer distance one. But yeah, there's only a handful of control frequencies these drones use.
Okay, so this is a more technical question. If you had an environment where GPS was being jammed, so like you are no longer able to use GPS as a waypoint, is there any way you could still navigate using physical waypoints or tags to bypass signal jamming? And the answer is actually yes. So like the US military had a program where they wanted to be able to use like open signals around them, and signals intelligence gathered by a ground station. That's going to be like Wi-Fi home networks, cell phone towers, like anything that creates a signal and has a non-moving, like a semi-permanent like location. You can build a map of that with techniques like war driving, or I guess war flying, and basically build a map of where all these signals are and where they're supposed to be. Now, if you had a directional antenna, so you can also tell what signals are in front of you and behind, you would have most of the necessary things to orient yourself in an environment and fly in a particular path. So while this is a very difficult type of wireless environment to fly in, you can actually use radio waypoints as a way of navigating around if GPS is not available. Now, how easy it is to actually implement that, ask the US military. I've never done it myself, but navigation via signals intelligence is definitely something that's possible.
A much older method is Terracom. Essentially, that was started in the Cold War for navigating cruise missiles. You just have a radio altimeter that looks down and it sees how high the ground you are off the ground, right? And by doing that for say a mile, you create a profile of how tall the Earth is, and then you compare that to an internal map, and you're like, okay, I'm exactly here because that's what you've flown over, and you can match that up pretty quickly. The modern implementation of that is called VSLAM, Visual Simultaneous Localization and Mapping. Essentially, you just have multiple cameras around, and by moving that camera through 3D space and remembering the previous images, you can map 3D space around yourself and track where you currently are in that 3D space. And then also there are inertial measurement units, which almost all drones have already in them. That's going to have error over time, but essentially it's, as you're in a car, right? You can feel yourself moving through space. Same thing for a drone. It can feel itself moving through space. You could also use other sensors like airspeed sensors to tell like how fast the air it's hitting is. And it can have a rough idea of, okay, I've gone 10 feet forward and 5 feet to the left kind of thing. But the longer you use IMUs, the less accurate it becomes because you get compounding errors.
Yeah, and if you're if you're doing something like flying over Kansas on a cloudy day, then measuring a perfectly flat terrain or measuring, or like having cameras looking at clouds, like probably wouldn't be so helpful. So like GPS is amazing, honestly. Like it makes this sort of stuff so easy that a lot of these backup systems are like kind of janky. Like when you compare like the way that the GPS just happens to work. So the answer is yes, it's totally possible using a variety of different systems to still navigate without GPS, but it becomes a lot more computationally expensive and sometimes will require a data link to like a more powerful computer to figure out exactly like where it is if you have less data to work with. So
or they just simply become less accurate. There are also really old systems like celestial navigation, literally looking at the stars, calculating where you are. But what we're talking, like with GPS, military GPS, RTK GPS, you can tell to a centimeter accuracy where you are. With like celestial navigation, the best you're going to do is a kilometer, maybe 100 meters if you have some really fancy magical stuff.
So here's a question. Any videos or informational webcasts or lectures outlining all these terms as it relates to drone and flight technology? I don't have any myself. Maybe you do?
Not off the top of my head. This is just all stuff that I, have always been curious in and looked up. There are a number of drone YouTube channels that you can look up. And then as far as when I was getting my Part 107 license, there are a number of courses offered online. I can try to pull up the one I took, but I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
So I don't really have an answer for this one, but I do want to mention, what do you think is the best way to resolve attacks on an Android device or any resources that leads to effectively reverse engineer malware if it's already infected and preemptively protecting is not an option? Honestly, like if you've got a suspect file or something, then like, of course, the first thing is always just like doing something like putting it through VirusTotal and like seeing what it says, if it recognizes it as a strain of malware, or if it will show you what it's executing, what it's modifying, like what it's trying to do. Like that's the easiest way to do it. I have no experience doing incident response with Android devices, so I really I would go and find someone with experience with incident response dealing specifically with Android. So yeah, unfortunately, I think it's a highly specific question and nobody knows what it's infected with. So it could be like some script kiddie, like adware stuff, or it could be like a nation state. Like I really wouldn't even know where to get started. So unfortunately, I can't answer that one myself. Michael, any thoughts?
Not on that. I do have the website I use to train for my remote drone pilot license pulled up. It's Pilot Institute. The course was very thorough. There were a couple of things that were a little dated, but I feel like that's the nature of any course in a rapidly changing environment. But yeah, if you're ever interested, it was a little pricey, but also they had like the guaranteed, if you fail this test, we'll refund you kind of thing, which was really nice.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that is nice. All right, here's a question. What are some fun projects you can do with a drone? So from my own personal history with the drone, my favorite projects have been war flying. So flying around and using like a mounted microcontroller to gather like signals intelligence data about the area around you and also location data about where those signals are. We did a really cool video on Hack5, which I think they took down, where we tracked our friend using that. Oh, actually, no, I think that the drone video is still up. So yeah, we managed to track my friend Christian walking around a park using just like a little signals receiver on the bottom of a DJI-2 drone. So that was actually really cool. And you could use that for a variety of different things, everything from like Bluetooth stereos in vehicles, someone's like personal like headphones with like a MAC address that never changes. Like all that stuff would be like pretty useful for flying around and finding stuff. Michael, what do you
Yeah,
think?
the things I would be most interested in is first, kind of similar to what you were saying, is like fox hunting from a drone. So you could put an SDR. You don't have to have like a larger drone like the one on the screen there, but you can put an SDR on there and not track just Wi-Fi, but you could triangulate any radio emission. That could be, FM tower. It could be some company using their own personal radio frequency to communicate in a factory, right? It could be anything. So it's really interesting fox hunting opportunities there. And then also just photogrammetry and orthomosaics, it's fancy words there. But essentially what that means is photogrammetry is taking multiple, similar to VSLAM, taking multiple images and then making a 3D model of something with just flying a drone around it. And then orthomosaics are, so anytime you go on like Google Maps, right, and you turn on satellite view, that's basically what you're looking at, right? But with a drone, you could have that updated today, and you could have a resolution that the Cold War U.S. would have been salivating over, right? So it's a really cool opportunity to really map target environments, for example, and do things like that.
So here's a comment by James that I think is really interesting, and I don't know for sure if this is happening, but it would make a lot of sense. So like my perspective on this is similar to the way that like a lot of Wi-Fi hacking stuff happens, where by having signals that are not authenticated in any way, shape, or form, like Wi-Fi beacons or like deauthentication frames, it makes it possible for these attacks against Wi-Fi devices use it like deauthentication or like malicious beacon frames or things like that. Similarly, if you are relying on a device that's a GPS device and it's receiving signals that are not encrypted, not authenticated in any way, shape, or form, it's impossible to know whether or not you're getting legitimate GPS coordinates or you're getting ones that are spoofed. Now, if somebody was, like spoofing these signals and there was instead an encrypted version of GPS, you would be able to tell because you would be able to use your special key to access that GPS's encryption and be like, okay, this is being sent from like an encrypted source that I have the key to. Like it's reasonably certain that an outsider without knowledge of that key is not sending these GPS coordinates, and thus they are legitimate. It all makes sense to me. Like that's the way the WPA3 has upgraded Wi-Fi security by adding authentication to some of these like beacons or other things that are generally unprotected, but end up being super important during spoofing or something like that. So, I mean, while I don't know anything about whether that's happening personally, maybe Michael does, I do think that that's a great idea. And there's lots of other analogies for how authenticating a signal like that has actually increased security.
Yeah, so the latest generation of military satellites or the military GPS satellites are using M code. So there's the civilian bands of GPS, but then M code is encrypted. They had an older encryption standard, but this is a newer encryption standard. And also it's higher power, and the way they spread it out across the frequency bandwidth is designed to be more resistant to jamming. Because the problem with GPS is because it's so far away, it's very easy to jam because it's a really weak signal. There are solutions you can get around jamming, like aiming a antenna very precisely up at the sky to help avoid jamming from the sides. But yeah, there's encrypted M mode military GPS that's supposed to be more accurate as well. And then there was another question, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. About the war flying and versus driving.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I feel like war flying, you're going to have better potential for accuracy just because you can get more three-dimensional data. So like you can get height data if you're set up to support that. Not everything is. And then also just the ability to cover terrain really fast. Like, if you're like, instead of like having to circle the block, you can fly a drone in a pre-programmed pattern for 15 minutes and get a much more thorough map.
Yeah, I would say so there's a couple ways that war flying I think is superior to war driving, and those are one of them is we were searching a park for a person walking through a giant park. Like we would have to drive all the way around the perimeter of that park and then hope that we get a couple like good hits. And if the person is in the center of the park, or if they're moving, our 2 hits might not have that person in the same place. So what's nice about a drone is like you're moving relatively quickly. If you get an intermittent signal, you generally have line of sight. So that means that there's no weird radio dead spaces caused by buildings or concrete barriers or other things that might absorb the signal that might block you while you're driving on a nearby street. Because you're coming from the air, there's really good line of sight. And that means that you're more likely while you're traveling to get multiple hits on the same Wi-Fi signal while it's still in relatively the same position. So over a shorter period of time, you'll get more hits, and that leads to better accuracy. Because if you maybe got 2 hits while we're driving, but that person is either moving or something else happens like that, it could make it more difficult for you to find out where they are, especially if there's like something getting in the way between you and the signal that makes the signal weaker than it should be. So grid searching any area that doesn't have great roads, or for getting like line of sight, I would say it's a little bit better. The only kind of caution I would give on that is that most of the time the router in someone's house has like that little, like donut like style antenna that's just a little like nub, and it creates a donut shape like radiation pattern around it that's really good for everybody on the same floor, because like humans generally live on the same plane. So like unless you have a multi-story house, like most of the time a Wi-Fi network is going to be set to give really good coverage on one floor. If you're flying above that, you're going to get worse reception because the antenna is designed to spread out the radiation horizontally in a big donut shape. It's not really looking to blast Wi-Fi radiation straight up. So while you are going to get better line of sight, you might actually get a slightly weaker signal depending on the type of antenna that a router is using, especially if it's configured to like the standard donut style radiation like pattern that most are. So that's really the only caveat I would say where like a ground-based solution would be better, would be if you're driving through an area that has a lot of like home Wi-Fi networks all on the same level. Of course, if you had a building, like a multi-story building with Wi-Fi networks, then everything changes and suddenly being in the air is great again. So lots of trade-offs, actually. Speed is great, line of sight is great, but taking advantage of the radiation pattern of the standard like home Wi-Fi router might not be as good as you would expect.
Well, and I would also add to that, I think driving is better for passive mass surveillance, if that makes sense. So like wiggle Wi-Fi, right? Like if you're like, okay, everyone's just going to download, or like Google does this with Wi-Fi, right? Like everyone that has a Google device is passively sniffing Wi-Fi, nearby Wi-Fi networks for Google, so that way they can use it to enable more accurate GPS locations, right? But in that way, driving is much better because like everyone's going to have their phone on them.
Hey,
And then JR had a question about a really interesting question about surveillance and consumer drones. And I don't know that there's actually that many protections in place. And it actually gets into some really interesting conflicts where people are like, oh, you fly your drone over my property and I'll shoot you down. Well, I hate to tell you, but you've just committed a federal crime, because that drone in the FAA's eyes is no different than a commercial jet. So if you just shot down my drone, you've committed a really serious crime. So yeah, there's in theory not much preventing you from flying a drone a couple of hundred feet over anyone's house, right? Seeing in their backyard, like if you get really close to the ground, then you could get some other arguments like, okay, you're actually on their property. But as far as like flying over it, yeah, there's nothing, because like think about it, like planes fly over your house every day. You don't have any control over that.
you can't shoot down a plane that flies too low over your house.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, I think that the like Border Patrol was flying a Black Hawk like super low over over someone's like house, and they shined a flashlight on it to see what the hell was going on, and they got charged for blinding the pilot. So even if you're just shining a flashlight, there's some restrictions on like what you can do to any sort of aircraft, of which a drone is included. So yeah, a lot of people have thought like, yeah, if it's flying over my house, I can shoot at it if the drone's harassing me. And it's not true. Although if there was a little accident, like you're flying your drone legally over your own house and you just happen to collide with an invading drone, that would be unfortunate.
Well, and it gets back to that other question we had about jamming drones and stuff, because you have this whole wave of solutions coming out about anti-drone technology, because obviously there are corporations or companies, factories, stuff like this that might have reason to want to keep secret what they're doing, right, on their property. But there's like, it's an interesting thing where they don't have like legal recourse, but these tools are being developed, and it's like the law just isn't evolving with the technology, if it makes sense. So there's some catch up that needs to happen.
Michael, I don't know if you remember, but did you go with me to that DEF CON talk on like how like all the like where the guy got a budget to go like purchase all the different anti-drone solutions, and like the most effective of the one he checked out was just training a bird to attack drones. And it was $100,000 to train this bird how to go after drones. And then you just own the bird. You have to feed it. You have to have like a hawk guy that catches it. And the bird just hates drones. And maybe they give it some armor so it doesn't get messed up by the spinning blades.
Well, my favorite thing out of that talk was they discovered that putting chicken wire around the drone made it impervious to like almost all of the anti-drone physical solutions. Because like there's a lot of solutions that involve like shooting a net of some sort at the offending drone, either from another drone or from the ground or whatever. Like you just put a chicken wire mesh around your drone propellers and it's invincible.
So here's a comment by James, which is actually very accurate, and I'd love to show this off. So what is the radiation pattern of your home Wi-Fi network look like? Well, it looks like a donut. Like it looks like these donuts actually. So if you wonder why you might not be getting great reception upstairs or downstairs, it's because a typical just like little like stick antenna creates a radiation pattern like this. Now, James made the observation that the longer the antenna, the flatter the donut, and that is true. You're basically squeezing the radiation into like more and more of like a searchlight pattern. And the smaller the antenna gets, the more kind of like circular or like round or tall, I guess, the donut gets. So if you really want like a long range, like omnidirectional antenna, then you get one of these super tall, like DBI, 9 DBI ones that squeezes that donut out into like a relatively thin slice. But you'll find that people, within that slice get substantially better signal coverage than maybe a 5 dBi antenna where you're standing like right out here. So, I mean, the power doesn't really get more with these. It just focuses the energy into a wider and wider donut. So if you're wondering how like omnidirectional Wi-Fi antennas work, that's pretty much how they work. And we also have directional antennas that kind of squeeze it out into more of like a searchlight style capacity. I would say that like the difference between a directional and an omnidirectional antenna is an omnidirectional antenna acts like a lamp, and a directional antenna acts like a flashlight. And it's all the same power. It's just being focused in one direction or allowed to kind of like spill out and create a pattern like this. But yes, good observation. The longer the antenna, the thinner the donut. And that all goes back into how you will receive that signal while you are either war driving or war flying. All right, we've got like 15 minutes left. So a couple things I wanted to bring up. One, this is probably the last stream we'll have before we hit 50,000 subscribers. So yeah, I just wanted to give ourselves a shout out. We've been working hard on this channel for years, and getting to the 50,000 subscriber mark is definitely something significant. So thank you to everybody on this channel. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed and supported us along the way. It's wonderful to have been along with you on this journey, and we're going to keep on growing. Like when we made Nullbyte, 50,000 was along where it started like really picking up steam and like started like growing faster and faster. So yeah, it's taken us a while to get to this point. We put out a ton of content, 445 videos on this channel already. But yeah, it's been quite the journey, and it's really rewarding to see us grow to 50,000 subscribers. So thank you, everyone, and congratulations to us.
Do you think you'll get the play button this time?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so if you don't know, Michael and I have now worked on 2 different channels that have gotten like special play buttons, and we will never see the play buttons from either. We worked on Nullbyte, who was refused a play button. As soon as we started getting like tons of attention, I reached out to YouTube. It was like, hey, like we got like a little congratulations email, but like we didn't get a play button or anything. Like, yeah, your content is actually like against our terms of service technically. Like we're not gonna get rid of you, but like you don't get any rewards. We're not gonna acknowledge you. You're not eligible for monetization, and we hate you. So like our first introduction to like Nullbyte was that, or sorry, to YouTube was that being like, oh, nice channel. Too bad it sucks. No play button for you. So then we joined Hack5, and we were on Hack5 for over a year, putting out excellent content. We put out some of our best content on Hack5 actually. And then a while ago, they locked us out of the channel. So right when our content was about to help them like go over the line and get a brand new play button, which by the way, they told us they were going to send us one, I would be absolutely shocked if we were to receive a play button now, because I haven't heard from Hack5 in like 3 months now. So it's been some time since they just like locked us out of the channel and then like didn't really tell us what was happening next. So yeah, we are going probably to be YouTube play buttonless for the foreseeable future. However, I don't know, like maybe they'll give us
I
one
thought
for
there was one that comes out at 50K. I'll have to look up the numbers
Really?
again.
I thought that they bumped it up because like everybody, I'm
Yeah.
not going to say anybody with enough time and persistence can hit 50K, but you know, like 100K is where I would start giving out play buttons, but I'm not YouTube, so I guess we'll see. But yeah, so we have brought 2 channels over the line to get like a special YouTube play button, and we still have not gotten one. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't get one in the future, so I wouldn't think about it too much, but
says 100K, 1 mil, and 10 mil. So we have to double the subscribers. If every one of you went out and grabbed one friend and had them subscribe, we could get a play button.
Yeah, so Shannon Morris also worked with us on the Hack5 channel, and she's apparently talking about working the channel but not getting a YouTube play button. I'm not surprised at all. But yeah, we put some of our best content on Hack5, and I'm a little annoyed, honestly, that like a substantial part of it has just been taken down for like not really any reason they've given us. So if you've noticed that a lot of our videos on Hack5 were taken down, that's why we don't make great content on channels we don't own anymore. And that's why we're working more on the Reddit channel, and you'll continue to see content be put out there because we're just honestly tired of what happened to Nullbyte and then eventually what happened to Hack5. So yeah, super excited about the new number of subscribers. We're gonna keep it growing, but yeah, I'm not expecting a play button. I could just make one, honestly. You know what? I should have two play buttons from now. I should just 3D print one and just spray paint it and have it in the corner. And if they tell me to take it down, I'll be like, no. The real play buttons are the friends you make along the way. Yeah. I think that's probably the most we're gonna get from this situation.
I think they were discussing dissecting the robot birds.
Okay. Yeah.
Not things we want to do on the YouTube channel.
I'm not sure that this is the bird dissecting channel. All right, so here's a question. Can a drone that is built on at home be hacked and confused to explode? It really depends on how bad of a job the person who built the drone did. If they neglected like charging circuitry that like prevents that stuff, or like some of the like safety things that you should have integrated into your drone to prevent that from happening, it might actually be possible to confuse it into exploding by overloading the battery or causing a feedback loop or causing a short, which causes part of the drone to get extremely hot and burst into flames. So that's a wide open question. I don't know who this is, how professional they are, what kind of background and budget they have. But if they are not very smart, don't have much of a budget, and have zero background, yes, it probably would be possible to cause a drone to get hacked and burst into flames. At least burst into flames. If you consider a LiPo battery, exploding, then yes, I think that it would be possible to do this, but there's a lot of variables here, and I do not think it would be possible with most drone kits or most like commercial drones. So
I think it would be more likely that you could just like send signals to the props to spin as fast as possible and get them to burn the motors up. That would be much more likely, because the battery itself is going to have overcurrent protection on it, basically built in when you buy the battery itself, not even as an extra part. So getting it to burn itself up is going to be pretty difficult. Although if you wanted to, you could just shine a really bright laser at it, just as another option.
Yeah, there are definitely some ways to mess up drones. Causing it to shoot straight up until the motors burn out certainly sounds like a rude thing to do. But I think my favorite story of like drones getting hacked was Sammy Kamkar's Skyjack, I think it was called, which allows you to use a Raspberry Pi Zero W as like a signals or like an electronic warfare device, and hijack the signal of the control Wi-Fi signal of like low cost drones and allow you to fly off with it. So some sorts of like older drones have features that can be hijacked even in the air. Being able to cause them to explode, though, I haven't seen that one done as extensively. And again, I think that relies on the absence of like some pretty standard like charging protection stuff that should prevent that sort of thing from happening. But obviously, if someone's inexperienced or they have a low budget, then it's totally possible that they could have forgotten those sorts of things.
I don't even think it would be possible on a military drone either, because a lot of those have basically there's the whole insensitive munition um, initiative, which basically means using explosives and stuff that makes it where the thing won't blow up, or if it blows up, it kind of just flames, right? It doesn't actually catastrophically explode.
James says that one one funny thing would be you do the Stuxnet thing and pulse the rotors at different speeds till they fail, like they did with the centrifuges.
That's
Yeah,
right.
honestly, overloading like one of the motors super hard and causing it to burn out like one by one would be confusing and probably make the operator think that like there was something wrong with the drone or something in the air hit it or whatever. Like I know that if my drone started blowing motors one by one, like it, instead of like all at once, like I wouldn't think that it had gotten hacked. I would think that there was some sort of fault and it would probably make me waste a lot of time trying to fix it. All
So
right, so
no
we
more questions about Microsoft certifications,
oh,
or
Michael, now's your time to shine. Actually, for one thing I wanted to shout out is so everybody who's been following along on the Raspberry Pi crisis knows that Raspberry Pis have gone from $35 to $135 for like the past 2 years. I have started finding these Raspberry Pis for like $60 online, which is like too expensive already still, but like whatever, like compared to double that, like it's not a big deal. Um, but I have never seen this revision of the Raspberry Pi 3B before. Fortunately, some people in the chat shouted out that this is actually the most recent iteration or the recent revision of the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, but it definitely suffers from heat issues, especially when I look on thermal imaging. This chip right here gets incredibly hot. So if you know anything about this model of Raspberry Pi, if you've worked with it before, please feel free to shout out both in the chat or like in the comments later and let me know what it's like because I have a lot of these now and they seem a lot more prone to thermal throttling than any Raspberry Pi that I've worked with before. All right, and with that, Michael, take it away. Let's talk about certifications and what you're working on.
oh yeah, okay. So you want to show my screen?
Yes,
Okay.
boom.
So the one I have here pulled up is the one I got initially between employment. I was basically bored, wanted to learn about security, particularly related to Microsoft, because I believe you'll find that in a lot of businesses ranging from small to enterprise, a lot of them are using Microsoft as their primary solution, but like Azure and the whole suite of products. So this certified security compliance identity fundamentals, it's really like this deep. It's like an inch deep and a mile wide, right? It just goes over all the types of security products, particularly looking at Microsoft security products, how they work together in a secure environment. So, like MDR, SIEM, antivirus, like what that looks like in a modern way, how that would work together, doing role-based access, identity management, that type of thing. So I took that test, that exam, passed it. It was pretty easy. And if y'all are looking for ways to study, don't know if y'all have ever heard of CBT Nuggets, but great platform, really good courses. But there's also a lot of courses on Udemy and other places, especially for these sorts of Microsoft certifications since they're so popular. But yeah, that's where I started off. Now I'm working on this identity and access administrator associate. This one's a little more in the weeds of like working in an Active Directory tenant and securing identities, using role-based access, just-in-time access, and things like these. So that way you can really lock down, especially since traditionally we would think as like a firewall as our first layer of protection. But I find that in modern environments, really your identity is your first primary layer of security, right? We don't want to have we want to be careful about thinking of it as layers of security, but you want security in depth, right? Like you don't want the impenetrable fortress wall and then vulnerable once you get past that. But yeah, identity administrator associate, really interesting stuff, and then working towards the security architect expert, which is actually very, very similar to that first security fundamentals. Like the material is almost exactly the same, inch deep, mile wide, right? This is for the higher level individuals, helping create the architecture, right? But this exam tends to take the questions and really apply them. Where the first exam would be things like what does Microsoft Sentinel do? This would be like, okay, you have this scenario with a client. What product would you recommend? That sort of thing.
Cool. So we've got, I mean, I think we're technically over our time, but if you want to show off any other certifications, or if anybody has questions about certifications, we get these questions all the time, and finally Michael's in the position to answer them. So, it's good to see that, for one, you've already cleared through one of the certifications you wanted, and then you've got another one that you think is useful and that you're working towards. It seems like a good kind of like beginning for people who want to get some of these certs on their resume and let employers know that they already know this. One question is, what is the cost?
Yeah, so the cost will vary from certification to certification, but you're generally looking at this like $150, kind of $200, or like the first one I got was the $99 one. But basically $100 to $200. What I found is oftentimes employers will compensate you, especially if you're like, hey, I'm going to take my own time and I'm going to train for this. What you can usually convince a manager to do for you is you front the money for the exam, but then if you pass it, the company will compensate you or reimburse you for that. And with CBT Nuggets, usually you can get a company to pay for that, but it's like $50 a month or so, something like that. Really highly recommend that for practicing. But yeah, I think that's how I would answer that question.
Cool. All right, so I think that we're just about done for today. One question we always ask, though, that I figure I'll just insert because no one's asked it yet, is, Michael, are you going to DEF CON this year?
Yes, the plan is going to DEF CON, and I believe, pending verification, that Kody and I will be press goons this year.
Yeah.
It'll be the first year being a goon, which will be a little interesting.
Absolutely, yeah. And also, I know that. Oh, so let me stop sharing your screen real quick. Also, I know the last couple years we have been at the Hack 5 booth. Obviously, with our videos being deleted without much explanation, our team is not going to be at the Hack 5 booth anymore. However, it looks like we are going to be at the Hacker Warehouse booth. So if you're looking for us at DEF CON, we are going to be there. We are going to be selling nuggets, and we are doing a special surprise project/game that we're crossing our fingers is going to be done in time. It's extremely ambitious, but we are going to be releasing something really cool at DEF CON. So look out for us at the Hacker Warehouse booth. Our team is going to be there. And if you've run into us before, we were like literally half of the Hack 5 booth is like our staff, our team. So you'll see a lot of the same faces at the Hacker Warehouse booth this time. We're really excited about it. Hacker Warehouse is awesome. We've been working with them for a while now. And so we will see you guys at DEF CON. And just a little update, since we're talking about CBT nuggets, maybe I'll mention this as well. If you've already got one of our nuggets, then our sometimes co-host Angelina Sapois has gone through and made this incredible website that lets you get started with it really easily. You can find out all the various projects that are supported by the nugget, and then flash them and even connect via serial on it. We're going to be launching more features at DEF CON, but stay tuned because we've made a lot of really cool things for people who want to get started with microcontrollers and want a really simple and easy way to do it. So kind of cool to be able to come out with this and do some additional ambitious stuff at DEF CON. Stay tuned for more information about that. I don't want to get everyone too excited if something falls through, and it's we're really doing it at the last minute this time, but I think it's going to come together, and I'm really excited with the way it's going to look. So we'll see you guys at DEF CON, and per always, going to give a big shout out to Varonis for letting us continue to do this. We always have a lot of fun on the stream, and I mean, we've gotten to 50,000 subscribers. So if you want to support us, go ahead and go to varonis.com/Kody, Kody, that's my name. And they actually do check to see how many people go through this link, even if you don't do anything after. It helps support the show and lets us know that you're watching. So thank you to everyone. And of course, if you have questions that weren't answered, you can drop them in a variety of questions and we will get to them next week. Number one would probably be our Discord community, which I'll pull up again. And that is at nugget.lol, nugget.lol. You can find us there, ask questions, and also jump in the live chat. Not only Have we had people posting news that they want us to go over, which is super easy because it makes my life awesome and simple. You can also join the live Q&A and drop like full questions in here, which we'll answer in a thread. And of course, if you want to, you can go onto our YouTube channel and leave a comment there. Okay, Michael, thank you for joining us. And also, you want to give a shout out to your employer for letting you come on the stream and be a resident expert?
First Call Computer Solutions of Western Montana. If you're happen to be a small or medium-sized business in Western Montana looking for a managed service provider or some advanced security solutions, then give us a ring.
Absolutely. And James is saying share the Discord for newcomers, nugget.lol. There you guys go. We will see you on Friday, I believe. And actually, I should mention this. I will probably be off next week. That is because I am hosting a kids cyber camp in Northwest Montana. And we are going all out for it. It's going to be 5 days of cyber stuff. We're using Raspberry Pis, wireless network adapters, nuggets, microcontrollers, breadboarding. It's a lot. So we're going to be preparing and doing that next week. So I may not be on the stream next week, but I will be back the week after. So we'll see you on Friday and then probably the week after that. Thanks, Michael, for being on the stream. Thank you, everyone else, for hanging out with us this week. And we will see you all next time. Goodbye.